boot, catching him first on one kneecap, then on the other. It was a joke of long standing. Mrs. Stitch turned her face of clay in which only the eyes gave a suggestion of welcome towards her visitor. "Come in," she said. "I'm just going out." "Why £20 to Mrs. Beaver?" "That was for Lady Jean's wedding present," said Mrs. Holloway. "I must have been insane. About the lion's head of the Centurion's breastplate there's a beautiful one over the gate of a house near Salisbury called Twisbury Manor. Copy that as near as you can. Ring up Country Life and ask for back numbers. There was a photograph of it about 2 years ago. You're putting too much ivy on the turret, Arthur. The owl won't show up unless you have him on the bare-stone, and I'm particularly attached to the owl. Moonera, darling, like Tum-Tiddy. Always a short A in neuter plurals. It sounds like an anagram. See if terracotta fits. I'm delighted to see you, John. Where have you been? You can come and buy carpets with me. I found a new shop in Bethnal Green kept by a very interesting Jew who speaks no English. The most extraordinary things keep happening to his sister. Why should I go to Viola Chasm's distressed area? Did she come to my model madhouse? Oh, yes, Mrs. Stitch. Then I suppose it means 2 guineas. I absolutely loved Waste of Time. We read it aloud at Blakewell. The Headless Abbot is grand. Headless Abbot? Not in Wasters. On Arthur's ceiling. I put it in the Prime Minister's room. Did he read it? Well, I don't think he reads much. Terracotta is too long, madam, and there's no R. Try Hottentot. It's that kind of word. I never can do anagrams unless I can see them. No, Twisbury. You must have heard of it. Floribus austrum, Josephine chanted, perditus et liquidus emisi fontibus apros, having been lost with flowers in the south and sent into the liquid fountain. Apros is wild boars, but I couldn't quite make sense of that bit. We'll do it tomorrow. I've got to go out now. Is Hottentot any use? No H, madam, said Britling with ineffable gloom. Oh, dear, I must look at it in my bath. I shall only be 10 minutes. Stay and talk to Josephine. She was out of bed and out of the room. Britling followed. Miss Holloway collected the checks and papers. The young man on the ladder dabbed away industriously. Josephine rolled to the head of the bed and stared up at him. It's very banal, isn't it, Boot? I like it very much. Do you? I think all Arthur's work is banal. I read your book, Waste of Time. Ah. John did not invite criticism. I thought it very banal. You seem to find everything banal. It's a new word whose correct use I've only lately learnt, said Josephine with dignity. I find it applies to nearly everything. Virgil, Miss Britling, and my gymnasium. How is the gymnasium going? I am by far the best of my class, although there are several girls older than me and 2 middle-class boys. When Mrs. Stitch said 10 minutes, she meant 10 minutes. Sharp on time she was back, dressed for the street. Her lovely face, scraped clean of clay, was now alive with interest. Sweet, Josephine. Has Mr. Boot been boring you? It was all right, really. I did most of the talking. Show him your imitation of the Prime Minister. No. Sing him your Neapolitan song. No. Stand on your head just once for Mr. Boot. No. Oh, dear. Well, we must go at once if we're to get to Bethnal Green and back before luncheon. The traffic's terrible. Algernon Stitch went to his office in a sombre and rather antiquated Daimler. Julia always drove herself in the latest model of mass-produced baby car, brand new twice a year, painted an invariable brilliant black, tiny and glossy as a midget's funeral hearse. She mounted the curb and bowled rapidly along the pavement to the corner of St. James's, where a policeman took her number and ordered her into the road. 3rd time this week, said Mrs. Stitch. I wish they wouldn't. It's such a nuisance for Algy. Once embedded in the traffic block, she stopped the engine and turned her attention to the crossword. It's detonated, she said, filling it in. East wind swept the street, carrying with it the exhaust gas of 100 motors and coarse particles of Regency stucco from a once decent Nash facade that was being demolished across the way. John shivered and rubbed some grit further into his eye. 8 minutes' close application was enough to finish the puzzle. Mrs. Stitch folded the paper and tossed it over her shoulder into the back seat, looked about her resentfully at the stationary traffic. This is too much, she said, started the engine and turned sharp again onto the curb and proceeded to Piccadilly, driving before her at a brisk pace until he took refuge on the steps of Brooks, a portly, bald young man. When he reached safety, he turned to remonstrate, recognized Mrs. Stitch, and bowed profoundly to the tiny black back as it shot the corner of Arlington Street. One of the things I like about these absurd cars, she said, is that you can do things with them that you couldn't do in a real one. From Hyde Park Corner to Piccadilly Circus, the line of traffic was continuous and motionless, still as a photograph, unbroken and undisturbed.